Hi guys, I'd like to share this interview with you from a few weeks ago featuring novelist and Star Trek Voyager story writer James Swallow. He's recently made headlines as he'll be writing the second book in the new trilogy of novels called Star Trek Coda. This news wasn't yet released when we did the interview, however. Swallow's book will be called The Ashes of Tomorrow and is due to be released on the 12th October. This interview deals primarily with his work on Star Trek Voyager, and on that subject, I'd also like to use this opportunity to raise awareness for the forthcoming Voyager documentary by 445 Films. There are a range of great perks or benefits of supporting the documentary, and I'll post a link to where you can do that in the description box below this video. For the time being though, sit back and think to yourself, there's coffee in that nebula, as you enjoy my interview with James Swallow. Hi folks, joining me on the Scotch Tracker today is the much-acclaimed writer James Swallow. As well as having written many Star Trek novels, he contributed 2 stories for Star Trek Voyager, which ended up becoming the 4th season episode 1 and the episode Memorial in the show's 6th season. Swallow was the first British writer to ever write for filmed Star Trek. Welcome, James Swallow, and thank you very much for joining me.
Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Looking back at the episodes you helped write, I wondered how you got involved in suggesting stories for Star Trek Voyager. Did you pitch other stories for Star Trek that weren't bought?
Oh, yes, a lot. Where did I start from? Well, originally I was a magazine journalist and I wrote for the official Star Trek Monthly magazine. And one of the things I was doing at the time was I was interviewing a lot of the people who were writers on the show and producers. A lot of the people who were working on the magazine used to enjoy interviewing the actors, but because I wanted to be a writer, I always liked talking to the writers. So I chatted to them and they kind of got to understand that I was interested in becoming a writer as well. And they said, well, would you like to come and pitch for the show? So I always say they kind of held the door open and kind of looked the other way and let me sneak in through the back door.
Just walk through that door and you'll never be alone again.
So I went into pitch and pitching story ideas it's kind of like the writer's equivalent of doing the X Factor.
This is the remote control. You select what you want to watch by pressing this button.
You know, it's standing up in front of an audience full of people and singing your heart out.
It's no fun to stand there by yourself.
And just doing your best and hoping that people really, really like you.
Look, I appreciate what you're trying to do.
But you have to pitch a lot of story ideas and you have to, come up with a story idea and say in a very quick, very pithy sort of way and just pitch it across very fast. And if they don't like the idea, they go, nope, next, nope, next, nope, next. And you have to have a lot of ideas and you have to be able to go through them quickly, and you can't be precious about it. If they don't like your idea, you have to go, okay, move on to the next one.
It's up to you to keep the ship running.
So it's a very intensive process. And getting a pitch sold is it's like winning the lottery.
Place your bets.
The odds are not on your side.
Maybe this was a bad idea.
Because the production team are taking pitches for 5 or 6 shows. And they're doing a dozen of those meetings every day. So they're getting hundreds of story ideas thrown at them. And you have to do something that gives an idea that they like enough that it kind of rises above all of the others.
Excellent idea, Captain.
So I think in the course of pitching for Voyager, I pitched over the course of 3 years, I think. And I sold 2 stories. And I think in that time, I probably pitched maybe 200, 300 story ideas of different kinds.
Wow.
So you see what the kind of the hit ratio is there for that.
It's certainly difficult.
So do you remember any of the details of the stories that you, like the other stories that you suggested?
Oh yeah. I keep I have those all on my computer. I never throw anything away, any of my old story ideas away. Sometimes I'll go back and look at them and go, could I use this somewhere else? And think about maybe rewriting it.
Is this likely to happen again?
I haven't really used any of those ideas in other places since then, but I always keep that stuff handy just in case. You never know.
We don't know for certain.
How did the episode 1 originate? I've read the episode was originally to feature the Doctor as the main character.
I, of course, would stay online in order to monitor everyone.
But was the story always about loneliness and socializing, and did it always contain hallucinations, much as it does in the final version of the episode?
Yeah, pretty much.
That would explain why you're hearing voices, seeing images.
They seemed real.
It was, as you say, it was originally going to be an episode about the Doctor.
That's true.
When I first pitched it, it was just before 7 of 9 had been brought into the show.
7 of 9. That's an unusual name. How did you get it?
It was my Borg designation.
I think at the time they hadn't actually introduced it at the series, but they were coming up with the idea and they were building the character and they were putting together the storylines.
From the beginning, you've seen things in her that no one else could.
And I pitched it as the Doctor alone on the ship, navigating the ship through this void.
I think I've demonstrated that I have a command of the rudimentary aspects of piloting.
And kind of slowly sort of starting to go crazy.
That's easy for you to say. You're not facing cybernetic oblivion.
And it was all going to be about the idea of sort of the way that isolation affects you. And it was with the Doctor because he's an artificial life form, because he's a holographic program. It was going to be about how his humanity was coming out, because a human in that situation would be adversely affected.
Most humans don't react particularly well to long periods of isolation.
And I wanted to sort of illustrate how he was becoming more human. But as we went through the development process, Seven was the new character on board, and they really liked the idea of giving that role to Seven, because it plays out some of the same ideas, but in a different way, because Seven is somebody who's previously been part of this collective.
I've heard the drones can't stand being alone. They're too used to the collective.
And then to put her in a situation where she's absolutely alone would be absolutely terrifying for her. And once we kind of got the idea of that, that's the way we got through it.
I can do this, Captain.
And I remember when I pitched the idea to Brian Fuller, who was one of the senior writers at the time, he said it reminded him of The Shining, if you've ever seen that movie, which is the family kind of knocking around this giant hotel and this big empty building, the Overlook Hotel, it was called. And as I explained it to Brian said, "That's it. It's Voyager is the Overlook Hotel. That's the tone of this story. That's how we'll tell it." And so it kind of just like spiraled away from there.
Once when I was a drone, I was separated from the collective for 2 hours. I experienced panic and apprehension. I am feeling that way now.
That was one of the most terrifying experiences of her life, right? And so this whole story, it's all about, facing the thing that you fear the most.
Seven? Are you frightened?
I am Borg.
The episode's three-letter title had previously been a working title of the second season Voyager episode Tuvix, and the episode that was eventually named One initially had the working title Perchance to Dream. Where did that title come from?
Ah, a name. I hadn't thought of that. What an intriguing question.
It's just from the quote, to sleep, perchance to dream.
Hamlet, Act 3, Scene 1.
Because it was all about the characters being in suspended animation.
Sleep tight.
It's one of those things where sometimes just an idea, an image in my mind will kind of like lead me off to the idea of a story. And the image I had was of this huge kind of container room with all of the characters in these suspended animation chambers just kind of going off into the distance. And that was the first idea I had. I thought, what if they were all in suspended animation? Well, why would that happen? And so on and so on. And that was kind of the impetus of the story. And then funnily enough, one of the very first pictures I got to see from the production was a photograph of exactly that shot in the episode of the containers, sort of like in the cargo bay. And I still remember kind of profoundly sort of like the kind of wow moment, because it was almost like from my head to the screen, it was really amazing to see that happen.
I noticed there's a TOS story outline called Perchance to Dream, and I thought surely it's not from that.
No.
I think not.
The episode 1 contains a Mutara-class nebula, which is unnamed in the episode, but is called the Swallow Nebula in the reference book Star Trek Star Charts by Jeffrey Mandel. Where did the idea come from that it would be a Mutara-class nebula?
That was just something to kind of reference back, because obviously we see the Mutara Nebula in Wrath of Khan.
We are now entering the Mutara Nebula.
So the idea was just that it would be a similar sort of, nebula.
What have we got here?
Looks like a Mutara-class nebula.
With this kind of radioactive component that is very dangerous. And the reason it was named the Swallow Nebula is obviously in the show it doesn't have a name, but Jeff Mandel, the graphic artist who worked on a lot of the shows and also, as you say, wrote the star charts, was a friend of mine. And when he wrote the book, he didn't tell me that he named a nebula after me as a kind of little sort of nod, which was, really nice of him to do. And I really appreciate that.
We came through the nebula in fine shape, thanks to you.
During the writing of the script of One, Harry Kim's birthplace was changed from New Mexico to South Carolina.
You mean, where am I from?
Do you know when or why this change was made?
No idea. As I say, my only kind of contribution to the story was what we call the premise. So like the initial idea for the narrative is past that point, the script writing was done by another writer.
There aren't many people I'd willingly turn that responsibility over to.
The Enterprise episode Doctor's Orders has a plot that's very similar to One, with most of the main characters having to undergo stasis to bypass the region of space, the character of Dr. Phlox being left to man the ship himself and experiencing hallucinations while doing so. What do you think about the similarities between One and that Enterprise episode?
Yeah, it's kind of, I remember when I saw the Enterprise episode, I was like, didn't I pitch this?
It's similar.
But the thing is like, the Paramount bought the story idea, so they can use that idea as many times as they like. So, I was like, oh, it's kind of cool that they play it out in a different way, because it's an interesting concept. And when you see it played out on Enterprise, because it's Phlox, because it's different characters, the story has a different feel to it. So I think I was really pleased to see them sort of reinterpret it.
I altered the recipe slightly. I hope you don't object.
Not at all.
I recently rewatched the episode Memorial and thoroughly enjoyed it. What empowered you to devise that story idea, and how did it develop?
Recharge the power cells.
Well, Memorial was that was an interesting one. Is often when I would pitch these ideas, what I would do is sometimes I would do it over the telephone, but a lot of the time I would travel over to Los Angeles and I would pitch in person, because I think you get a much better feel for the people that you're working with if you're in the room with them.
They were over there.
Before I would do the pitch meeting, the morning of the meeting, I would sit in my hotel room and I would take my notes and I would rewrite them onto little index cards that I could just have in my hand in the meeting as a way to kind of firm it up in my brain once again.
Beyond words lies experience. Beyond experience lies truth. Make this truth your own.
And so I was off to this meeting, and I had the index cards in my hand in the taxi, and I'm just going through them again, trying to remind myself, how am I going to pitch the story? What's the good ideas? And I just started thinking about other stuff. And I had a couple of one-line ideas, which I just jotted down on the back of the card. So I went into the meeting, and I don't remember what they were. I think I had like 5 or 6 ideas, and I pitched them, and every single one got shot down, one after the other. It's like, no, we're not doing that. No, we've done an episode like that. We've got an idea like that. No.
No. Not like this.
So you've got to imagine how I felt at that moment, right? I've traveled halfway around the world, spent all my money on flights and hotels for this 1 hour's worth of meeting, and it's like, no, go home. And I felt like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do now?
Some things are best forgotten.
Not this.
It was Brian Fuller I was pitching to, and Brian said, well, have you got anything else? Is that all you've got? Because he knew I'd come a long way. And I looked on the back of the car and I said, well, I do have this one idea that I literally wrote in the taxi on the way here. The characters having these flashbacks to being in a battle that they were never in, experiencing the memories of someone else.
These are real memories, not mere dreams or hallucinations.
And immediately I saw like a kind of light go on, and I thought, oh, I've got his interest. And I said, and this is the way we could play it out. And he said, oh, I like that.
I like it already.
When you would pitch an idea, if the writer you pitched it to liked it, they would take it to a meeting, kind of take it upstairs, and it would go to the next level. And then that would be presented to the team. And then they would talk about how they could develop the script, and it would go from there. And that was how Memorial came to be.
The mission proceeded as planned.
It was Brannon Braga who actually wrote that episode, which was quite great. Getting to work with him, on that story idea.
A lot of work to do. Some
kind of weeks later, when I'd gone back to the UK on a Friday night, I was playing games with a bunch of my friends, would you believe? And the phone rang at kind of like 10 o'clock at night. And I thought, who the hell is calling me at 10 o'clock at night? Because we'd been drinking quite a bit. So it was quite a jolly sort of Friday evening with my buddies. And I picked up the phone and I was like, who the hell is this?
Oh. Hello?
And a voice on the other end said, can you please hold for Brannon Braga? And I sobered up very, very quickly. And Brannon came on and he said, look, we want to do Memorial as an episode. I'm going to write it. Let's have a conversation about what we want to do. And I was like, oh, okay. And I remember I opened the door and I handed the beers to my friends and I said, "Don't come in. Stay away!" Because we had the telephone in the kitchen where the fridge was. And I was like, "Here's the beer. Get out. Don't come back in this room. You guys just carry on without me. This is going to take me a while." And then so we had that was our initial kind of story meeting. And then, we had a couple other conversations about it and eventually kind of developed the story idea from there.
No one's going to believe that.
They will if we all keep to the same story.
It was quite unexpected, but terrific for me because after I'd sold the first story pitch, obviously that was great, but I didn't want people to think of me that I was like just a kind of lucky guy, right? Like a one-hit wonder, that is oh, you just did one, you're just a tourist, you're not a professional. I wanted to do, if anything, I wanted to do another one more because I wanted to prove that this was a career that I really wanted, that I wanted to prove myself as a writer. So getting the second sale was really important to me, and I'm very pleased about the way the episode came out in the end.
Wonderful.
I wondered why Brandon Braga is cited in the credits, but yourself isn't.
Yeah, that's because of the with the story premises at that point. I was right at the beginning of my career. I didn't have an agent or anything like that, and they said, "Well, we're going to pay you." What they did is they bought out my credits, so they paid me, so I didn't have to have a credit. And because the thing is, if you get a credit on a show, on an ongoing show, every time it airs, you have to get paid again.
Yeah.
So there's a whole sort of process of royalties there. And, I was kind of at the stage in my career where it was like, this is the deal you're being offered. You got to take it or you don't. Mm-hmm. And they had loads of other ideas. And like I say, I had no agent. I was right at the start of my career. And I thought I'm just happy to have done the work. So, that's why I accepted the deal. I do feel a bit bad about, the fact that, the show doesn't have my name on it. But, that's just the way things go. And I've learned a lot since then as a writer, and I think it was an important lesson for me.
Because that's how you learn not to make the same mistake.
So with the fact that you didn't have an agent at the time being like an issue with the WGA?
What happens with that is that I do have a contract. So in the WGA records, if you go to the WGA headquarters and look me up, I'm right there, and there's the two contracts on file. The paperwork is all there, but the deal essentially said, we're going to buy you out, and I was just happy to do it.
And that's all part of the experience, the adventure. Think of the great explorers that came before us. They survived without creature comforts.
The plot reminded me quite a bit of some TNG episodes, such as Schisms and The Inner Light. Were these deliberate influences on Memorial? Oh,
definitely, yeah. I've always liked the episodes that have a bit of a kind of head game kind of thing going on. I think, one of my favorites is Frame of Mind, which is, Brandon Braga one, which, if you remember that episode, is where Riker wakes up in a mental institution and they tell him that he's never been on board a starship.
There was a time when you couldn't break away from your starship fantasy at all.
He has these flashbacks to being in a play about being in a mental institution, and it's all kind of very confusing about what is real and what is not. And I think I was definitely influenced on by that story as well.
I'm not crazy! I'm not crazy! I'm not crazy.
Did Memorial ever have a working title, or was it always called Memorial?
No, it was I think it did actually. Memory of Wartime. That was the original title for that, yeah.
I know you have a new novel out that's recently been published. I wondered if you could tell us a bit about that book before we conclude this interview.
Sure. Well, so I've just written a tie-in novel for the Star Trek Picard series. It's called The Dark Veil. If you've been watching the Picard show, you know that Deanna Troi and Will Riker turn up in one of those episodes. And the story is a kind of flashback. It's set a year after Jean-Luc Picard has resigned from Starfleet. And it's about Riker and Troi on board the USS Titan dealing with an enigmatic alien race and a Romulan starship with a commander and a first officer who are kind of like at loggerheads with each other. And it's about Riker dealing with this situation, Troi dealing with the aliens, and the whole thing started coming together with a conspiracy involving the Zat Vash and a lot of other sort of story elements in there.
Thank you very much for joining me today. I wish you well with all your writings. Where can fans find you on social media?
Oh, best place to find me is you can catch up with me on Twitter. It's @JMSwallow, or if you come to my website, which is jswallow.com, everything you need to know about all my Star Trek writing and all my other work is right there.
Cool. Thanks very much for joining us.
Oh, my pleasure.
To tell you the truth, I've enjoyed our little junket together.
Thanks for watching. If you've enjoyed the interview, please press the like and subscribe buttons, and see you next time on the Scotch Tacker. Check you later.